That Christmas night, a beautiful red velvet gift box unexpectedly appeared on my porch after 5 years of absolute silence. My name is Cynthia, a woman 45 years of age who spent years rebuilding a ruined family business. I carefully brought the package into the living room while feeling incredibly emotional seeing the sender's name printed clearly on the label. It was from my sister, the very person who had abandoned me during our darkest times. I smiled genuinely for the first time in years, believing this festive season had finally brought a miracle of reconciliation. Just as I reached out to eagerly tear off the sparkling wrapping paper, my husband Gregory stepped up from behind with a terrifyingly serious expression. He immediately grabbed my wrist with a firm grip before I could even brush the ribbon. "Wait, you shouldn't touch it," he warned in a low tone that instantly froze the warm atmosphere of the room. Looking at him in total confusion, I asked, "What's wrong?" while trying to process his sudden defensive reaction. Gregory silently pointed toward the bottom edge of the box where a microscopic slit had been expertly cut before being covered with transparent tape. Someone had deliberately tampered with this package in a highly unnatural way before delivering it to our doorstep. My initial excitement evaporated instantly, replaced by a freezing chill running down my spine as I realized this delivery carried no good intentions. If you were standing where I was, would you take the risk and open it or call for help first? Let me know your choice and why below. Staring at the gift box sitting untouched on the coffee table brought back memories of the specific events that caused our family's collapse. For decades, Mom and Dad operated a commercial construction materials supplier in the industrial sector of Chicago. They spent their days managing heavy shipments of steel and lumber for commercial contractors, coordinating complex shipping logistics, and scheduling daily deliveries across the city limits. They built a reputation for reliability by personally inspecting every outbound truck before it left the loading docks. 5 years ago, a longtime business partner initiated a corporate fraud scheme that dismantled everything they had built. The bank manager called our office one morning to notify Dad that the primary operating accounts showed a zero balance. Dad drove directly to the bank branch only to discover his partner had transferred the funds into untraceable offshore entities and disappeared overnight. The authorities launched a thorough investigation but found no physical evidence of his whereabouts. This theft instantly drained the company's operating capital and halted our entire supply chain. The remaining bank balances failed to cover employee payroll or satisfy the incoming invoices from our established supplier network. Dad spent his final weeks meeting with forensic auditors and bankruptcy lawyers, trying to salvage the daily warehouse operations. He collapsed while reviewing the finalized liquidation documents at his desk. He suffered a heart attack and passed away in his office chair before the paramedics could transport him to the emergency room. Mom deteriorated rapidly after losing her partner of 40 years. She stopped eating regular meals, isolated herself in the master bedroom, and actively refused all medical treatment from the visiting nurses. She contracted a respiratory illness and passed away just a few months later. I had to arrange her funeral service while simultaneously handling the legal fallout of the collapsing business. Immediately after we buried Mom at the local cemetery, Valerie walked back into the family house and began packing her belongings. She shoved her clothing into several suitcases, dragged them down the hallway, and walked out the front door. She entered a waiting car without looking back or offering a single word of comfort regarding our shared loss. She did not offer to help pay for the funeral expenses or assist with the mountain of legal paperwork left behind by our parents. Her calculated departure left me completely alone to face the financial consequences. I had to drive down to the main warehouse the next morning to officially terminate our remaining employees. I handed out their final paychecks, locked the steel security gates, and secured the empty facility. Creditors swarmed my front porch and pounded on the door just hours after I returned home. They shouted through the living room windows and demanded immediate payment for the missing corporate funds. Several suppliers drove delivery trucks onto our property and threatened to seize our personal vehicles from the driveway to cover their specific losses. Process servers showed up daily to hand me civil lawsuits from various unpaid vendors. I barricaded the doors and spent those first weeks sorting through stacks of unpaid invoices scattered across the floor. I organized the documents into separate piles based on urgency and drafted response letters to the court to delay the foreclosure proceedings on our family home. I spent hours organizing the debt statements, contacting the bankruptcy courts, and trying to negotiate payment plans with the collectors. Every phone call brought another threat of legal action or property seizure from vendors who refused to grant us any extensions. The sheer volume of the inherited debt required me to make a difficult choice about the future of the company. I gathered the financial reports, sat down at the kitchen table, and realized I needed to reach out to the only living relative I had left. 2 weeks after Mom's funeral concluded, I sat exhausted in the middle of a room cluttered with unpaid bills and decided to make a phone call for help. I gathered the past due notices from the bank and arranged them in a neat row across the surface of the dining table. I picked up my mobile phone to dial the primary contact number for Valerie to discuss our financial options. She was currently enjoying an incredibly comfortable lifestyle alongside her husband Derek in one of the most expensive residential neighborhoods on the East Coast. I listened to the phone ring several times before she finally answered the call with a highly distracted tone. I could clearly hear the clinking of crystal glasses and soft instrumental music playing in the background of her spacious home. I forced myself to swallow the lump in my throat while gripping the receiver tightly in my trembling hand. I took a deep breath to stabilize my voice before explaining the exact financial situation of the construction materials company. I detailed the pending foreclosure notices piled on the desk and the aggressive letters from our primary bank demanding immediate payment. I explained how the remaining inventory would be seized by the end of the month if we failed to secure emergency funding to appease the creditors. I really need you to help with a small amount to keep Mom and Dad's company before the bank forecloses on it, I pleaded, while looking directly at a final notice stamped in red ink. Valerie let out an audible sigh of annoyance before shifting her phone to the other ear to continue her conversation. She immediately dismissed my entire explanation without offering a single word of sympathy regarding our shared family crisis. She stated she was far too busy managing her own social calendar and planning an upcoming vacation to deal with a bankrupt warehouse operation. She made it perfectly clear she wanted absolutely nothing to do with the financial mess left behind by our deceased parents. I have no responsibility to pay off debts I did not create, so sort out that mess yourself, Valerie stated with absolute finality before I could even suggest a realistic repayment plan. She continued talking over my attempts to reason with her about preserving the decades of hard work our parents invested in the facility. She explicitly declared over the phone that she officially renounced any potential claim to the family inheritance or remaining commercial property. She legally distanced herself from the estate solely to guarantee she would never be held liable for a single penny of the outstanding corporate debt. The line went dead immediately after she delivered her final verbal rejection regarding the survival of the business. The dial tone echoed through the quiet room as I slowly lowered the phone away from my ear. The reality of her rejection forced me to accept that I had to face the mounting debts without any external support. Her complete abandonment compelled me to recognize that I was entirely on my own in this financial fight for survival. I placed the phone down on the wooden desk and wiped the tears streaming down my face with the back of my hand. I stared at the towering stacks of debt collection notices representing the ruined legacy of our family. I made a firm decision right then to refuse the bankruptcy lawyers advising me to liquidate the remaining warehouse assets. I began gathering the scattered documents into organized folders categorized by creditor priority and strict payment deadlines. I drafted a comprehensive list of the most valuable inventory remaining in the storage yard to calculate our exact liquid value. I spent the rest of the afternoon formulating a strict operational budget to cut all unnecessary expenses from the daily business operations. I contacted the remaining loyal suppliers to negotiate extended payment terms based on my personal guarantee of future compensation. I organized a meeting with the warehouse supervisor to discuss a modified operating schedule to minimize our overhead costs during the recovery phase. I locked the office door and walked out into the warehouse facility with a renewed sense of determination to handle this crisis. I resolved to take on every single financial burden myself to rebuild the company from the ground up without anyone else's assistance. For 5 consecutive years following that phone call, Gregory and I dedicated our entire schedule to operating the construction materials yard. Gregory submitted his resignation letter to his architectural firm and drove directly to the warehouse to begin his first night shift. He traded his office attire for steel-toed boots to operate the heavy machinery and load the outbound delivery trucks himself. He spent his evenings organizing the inventory logs and preparing the shipping manifests for the early morning construction deliveries. "We will get through this worst phase together, I promise," Gregory stated while securing a heavy pallet of bricks to the forklift. We canceled our personal subscriptions and moved out of our apartment to rent a cheaper room closer to the industrial district. We cooked all our meals at home and brought packed lunches to the office to avoid spending money at restaurants. We worked 7 days a week without taking a single holiday to maximize our dedicated debt repayment fund. Every extra dollar we earned went directly towards settling the outstanding balances with our original material suppliers. I scheduled weekly meetings with Chicago contractors to guarantee the quality and timely delivery of our remaining warehouse inventory. I brought physical product samples to their corporate offices to demonstrate the superior grade of our lumber and concrete supplies. The project managers tested our shipments on their active construction sites and gradually began signing new long-term supply contracts with us. The revenue from these new contracts allowed me to write checks to clear the smaller vendor debts one by one. I contacted the remaining creditors to establish structured payment plans based on the consistent income from our new business clients. The local construction community noticed our consistent reliability and started recommending our facility to other major urban development firms. The increased order volume generated a steady positive cash flow for the first time since the initial fraud incident occurred. We reinvested those corporate profits to lease 2 additional storage facilities to hold larger quantities of commercial building supplies. Gregory hired a team of warehouse workers to manage the expanded operations, while he focused on client relations and procurement. I spent several hours at the local bank transferring funds to the final creditor listed on the original bankruptcy filing. I watched the bank teller process the wire transfer and hand me the official confirmation document across the glass counter. "Today, we officially wiped out the company's last debt," Gregory said as he placed the stamped bank receipt on my desk. I reviewed the finalized accounting ledgers and verified the zero balance on our inherited liability accounts with my own eyes. We hired an independent financial valuation firm to assess the current market standing of our fully recovered business operation. The auditors examined our active commercial contracts and appraised the entire enterprise at a valuation of several $1,000,000. They provided us with a bound report detailing the impressive growth trajectory of the company over the past 5 years. The company transitioned from a bankrupt operation into a highly profitable cornerstone of the local construction materials industry. Gregory and I moved into a comfortable house in a quiet residential neighborhood after securing our long-term financial stability. We purchased new furniture for the living room and finally took a full weekend off to unpack our moving boxes. We established a sustainable management structure by hiring experienced supervisors to handle the night shifts and daily logistical operations. We finally managed to sleep through the entire night without worrying about early morning phone calls from aggressive collection agencies. The years of physical labor and financial sacrifice successfully transformed the company into an independently functioning and lucrative corporate asset. That Christmas night, while my husband and I were happily preparing a small dinner table under the warm lights, the doorbell suddenly rang to deliver a fateful gift. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel before walking to the front door to greet the delivery driver waiting on our porch. I accepted the package from his hands before carefully inspecting the printed shipping label attached to the brown cardboard. Seeing Valerie's name printed on the return address section brought a genuine wave of relief to my chest for the first time in several years. I felt incredibly happy while holding the heavy box, because I truly believed she had finally changed her perspective after 5 years of absolute silence. I carried the package directly into the kitchen where Gregory was organizing the silverware beside our prepared holiday meal. I smiled warmly while showing him the sender information printed clearly on the white delivery sticker attached to the wrapping. Perhaps she finally feels remorseful and wants to make peace with us, I said while placing the decorative package onto the kitchen counter. I felt a strong surge of hope that our broken sibling relationship could finally begin a brand new chapter of healing. I leaned closer to the counter to admire the beautiful red velvet material wrapping the mysterious holiday gift. I eagerly reached forward to tear away the sparkling wrapping paper covering the exterior of the beautiful velvet box. Gregory immediately dropped the silverware he was holding onto the wooden table before grabbing my wrist to halt my impulsive movement. His sharp eyes had already detected a very precise slice running along the bottom edge of the transparent sealing tape. He pointed his finger directly at the compromised seal to show me exactly where the packaging had been secretly altered. I do not think someone who ran away during a family crisis would suddenly become this generous and kind, Gregory stated while pulling my hand away from the package. He explained his serious concerns about the high probability of deceptive legal documents being hidden inside the velvet container. He suspected the package might contain papers specifically designed to trap me into providing a legal signature simply by opening the sealed contents. He warned me that accepting a tampered package from an estranged relative could trigger unforeseen legal consequences for our company. He firmly refused to let me touch the tampered item, while my judgment remained clouded by unexpected holiday nostalgia. His grounded logical reasoning instantly snapped me out of my temporary emotional vulnerability regarding my estranged sister. The warm hope I experienced just moments ago quickly dissolved into a deep sense of bitter disappointment. I crossed my arms over my chest while mentally processing the deceptive tactics hidden behind this festive delivery. A strong wave of defensive alertness washed over my mind as I realized the harsh reality of the current situation. I took a slow step back from the kitchen counter while staring at the red velvet material with newfound suspicion. I realized my sister was likely using the holiday season as a psychological manipulation tactic to bypass my usual boundaries. We mutually agreed to leave the suspicious package exactly as we found it, without breaking any more protective seals. Gregory carefully lifted the untouched box from the kitchen counter before carrying it directly into his private workspace down the hall. He placed the velvet box inside his heavy metal filing cabinet before turning the key to lock it securely away from us. We decided to wait until the commercial offices opened the following morning to have our legal counsel examine the delivery. I knew we needed professional legal intervention to safely uncover whatever malicious scheme Valerie had planned for our business. We returned to the dining room to finish our holiday meal while maintaining a heightened state of awareness regarding our surroundings. I spent the remainder of the evening mentally preparing myself for the inevitable legal battle approaching our doorstep. Early the next morning, Patricia brought the safety-checked box along with a detailed investigation file and placed them firmly onto my office desk. She pulled out one of the leather guest chairs to sit down before calmly opening the thick manila folder to reveal some shocking financial information. Patricia slid a stack of official court documents across the wooden surface for me to carefully review the highlighted sections. The printed paperwork proved that Derek had officially filed for personal bankruptcy after suffering heavy financial losses in various virtual investment projects. The financial records indicated Valerie herself was currently drowning in massive credit card debt across several different major banking institutions. She had stubbornly maintained her lavish spending habits and expensive lifestyle, despite their financial resources being completely depleted for several consecutive months. I looked at the highlighted statements showing thousands of dollars spent on designer clothing, while their residential mortgage remained entirely unpaid. They are drowning in debt, and your company is the only lifeline they are aiming for, Patricia stated while tapping her pen against the negative bank balances. Through aggressive market research, Valerie had recently discovered our construction materials company had become extremely successful since the day she abandoned our family. Knowing the current multi-million-dollar valuation of our recovered business immediately sparked her greed to return and steal the fruits of our difficult labor. Patricia then directed my attention toward the red velvet box, sitting harmlessly near the edge of my polished oak desk. She exposed the deceptive plot hidden inside the gift by carefully extracting several tricky legal documents cleverly disguised as festive greeting cards. These specific papers were carefully crafted to trick me into providing a legally binding signature confirmation without raising any initial suspicion during the holiday. If I had signed that delivery receipt last night, I would have accidentally authorized a preliminary transfer of certain administrative rights directly to my sister. My private investigation team uncovered an even more serious legal threat brewing just behind these deceptive holiday gift deliveries. They discovered Valerie was secretly bribing a licensed psychiatrist to forge a complete and highly damaging medical record in my personal name. She was actively plotting to prove my nervous system had been permanently damaged due to the extreme work pressure over the past 5 years. I flipped through the forged medical pages while my hands shook slightly from processing the sheer cruelty of her detailed psychological manipulation. I read the falsified doctor's notes claiming I suffered from severe paranoia and cognitive decline to justify my removal from the executive board. Is she really daring to use fake medical records to kick me out of my own company? I asked, while feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. Patricia nodded slowly before explaining the ultimate malicious goal behind this entirely fabricated psychological evaluation file sitting on my desk. This fake medical record would give Valerie sufficient legal grounds to file a formal petition within the state court system. She intended to officially request a full conservatorship over my personal assets to blatantly steal the company right out from under my control. She planned to present me as mentally incompetent so a judge would grant her absolute power over our hard-earned corporate bank accounts. Valerie wanted the legal authority to liquidate our construction materials inventory to satisfy her own personal creditors back on the East Coast. I closed the manila folder and leaned back in my office chair while preparing my mind for the inevitable legal battle approaching us. I instructed Patricia to immediately contact my primary care physician to secure my legitimate health records for our upcoming defensive strategy. We needed to gather our own authentic medical evaluations to completely destroy her fabricated case before she could ever present it to a sitting judge. I refuse to let the person who abandoned our parents in their darkest hour take away the legacy Gregory and I had sacrificed everything to rebuild. 1 week after that terrible gift arrived at our house, my office door was pushed open forcefully to pave the way for the arrogant appearance of the person sharing my bloodline. Valerie strode directly into the center of the room with her usual condescending demeanor without showing the slightest bit of hesitation. She walked straight up to my desk to loudly slap a thick copy of the fabricated medical records right onto the polished wooden surface. I remained seated in my chair while watching her cross her arms and look down at me with a triumphant smirk. She began pouring out a series of cold threats carefully wrapped in a thick layer of fake sisterly concern. She loudly ordered me to immediately hand over the complete executive control of the construction materials company without putting up any resistance. Just obediently sign this piece of paper, and you will receive enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life, Valerie stated while pointing a manicured finger at the signature line. She confidently declared herself as the only legitimate heir possessing sufficient mental capacity to properly manage the family business moving forward. She brazenly offered an insulting agreement where she would toss me a tiny monthly allowance like a beggar if I surrendered my ownership rights. I looked at the fraudulent documents sitting on my desk while maintaining eye contact with the woman trying to steal my entire livelihood. She explicitly emphasized that refusing to sign the transfer papers would force her to submit these medical evaluations directly to a local judge. She threatened to use the legal system to ensure I was permanently kicked out of the warehouse facility with absolutely nothing in my pockets. Contrary to her eager expectation of a panicked surrender, I maintained a steady and unbroken composure while sitting completely still in my executive chair. I did not shed a single tear or raise my voice while listening to her outline this ridiculous corporate takeover strategy. You cowardly ran away when this place was full of debt, so now you have absolutely no right to demand anything belonging to me, I replied while calmly pushing the fake medical file back across the desk. I firmly rejected every single absurd demand she presented, while directly exposing her cowardice during our family's most vulnerable moments. I refused to let her intimidate me after everything Gregory and I had sacrificed to save this business from the brink of absolute ruin. I reminded her how quickly she packed her designer bags to escape the massive financial burden left behind by our deceased parents, while I stayed behind to face the angry creditors. I watched her confident facial expression crumble into a mixture of utter humiliation and explosive rage as I dismantled her hypocritical facade. Valerie completely lost her temper when she realized her psychological intimidation tactics had completely failed to break my defensive boundaries. She aggressively snatched the stack of forged documents off the desk while letting out a frustrated scream that echoed through the quiet office space. She frantically gathered her belongings before turning her back on me to storm out of the room in a blind fury. She violently slammed the heavy wooden door behind her while roaring a final declaration to completely destroy my reputation at the upcoming court hearing. I remained at my desk while listening to her angry footsteps fading down the hallway toward the main warehouse exit. I took a deep breath to steady my racing heart while mentally preparing myself for the inevitable legal showdown she just guaranteed. I picked up my office telephone to call Patricia and inform her that our opponent had officially initiated the hostile confrontation. Several months later, a suffocating tension filled every single corner of the courtroom during the official hearing to determine the legal control of our corporate assets. I sat quietly beside Patricia at the polished mahogany defense table while observing the judge slowly reviewing the preliminary civil filings stacked on his elevated wooden desk. Valerie confidently walked up to the witness stand alongside her expensive legal representative to present her completely baseless arguments against my executive leadership capabilities. Her attorney formally submitted the fabricated psychological evaluation to the court clerk, while loudly claiming I lacked the mental capacity to properly run a commercial business. He pointed aggressively in my direction while delivering a heavily rehearsed speech about my supposed cognitive decline caused by the overwhelming stress of saving the bankrupt company. I maintained a perfectly neutral facial expression while listening to them present a completely fictional narrative designed solely to steal my entire corporate net worth. Gregory sat in the spectator gallery directly behind me while offering his silent support throughout the entire duration of their ridiculous opening statements. When the judge finally called upon the defense, I stood up from my wooden chair to walk calmly toward the center of the spacious courtroom. Patricia handed me a thick binder containing dozens of transparent health reports, verified by several of the most respected medical professionals currently practicing in America. I personally presented these comprehensive physical examinations to the bench to prove my absolute competency in managing the daily logistics of our warehouse facility. We submit these authentic cognitive evaluations to completely dismantle the fraudulent claims entered into the public record, Patricia stated while handing the verified binder to the court bailiff. The judge spent several quiet minutes adjusting his reading glasses to compare my legitimate medical clearances against the fraudulent psychiatric paperwork submitted by my sister. Patricia then stepped forward to present one final piece of undeniable evidence to the presiding court official to permanently end this ridiculous legal battle. She confidently pulled a sealed legal envelope from her leather briefcase to reveal an absolute power of trust document secretly created by Mom before her tragic passing. Patricia explained to the completely silent courtroom that Mom had worked with an independent estate lawyer to legally grant me full ownership of the entire company. She handed the certified copies of this irrevocable trust to the bailiff, who immediately delivered the documents to the judge for his official legal review. This unassailable legal document explicitly excluded Valerie from ever claiming any administrative authority or financial benefits from the commercial supplier business under any circumstances whatsoever. This binding legal trust proves my client has possessed absolute legal authority over the warehouse facility for the past 5 years, Patricia declared to the silent room. Faced with this solid legal proof of my sole ownership, the judge immediately slammed his wooden gavel to permanently dismiss Valerie's ridiculous petition. He firmly rejected all of her unreasonable demands for corporate control before turning his strict attention toward the falsified medical records sitting on his desk. The judge directly instructed the court bailiff to contact the local district attorney to initiate a formal criminal investigation into the blatant medical document fraud. He stated on the public record that presenting forged psychiatric evaluations to steal a commercial business constituted a severe felony carrying mandatory state prison time. Valerie completely collapsed into her leather chair while sobbing uncontrollably as she finally realized she had permanently lost her final desperate hope for financial salvation. 2 uniformed police officers entered the courtroom just a few moments later to officially place her under arrest for committing perjury and submitting fraudulent judicial evidence. She was securely handcuffed right inside the courtroom before being escorted to the county jail to face multiple felony charges related to her deceptive scheme. Her husband Derek was simultaneously sentenced to federal prison in a separate jurisdiction for his extensive involvement in defrauding multiple corporate investors out of millions. Their residential property was immediately foreclosed by the bank to cover their outstanding debts, while their luxury vehicles were repossessed straight from their paved driveway. Gregory gently placed his hand on my shoulder while we watched the severe consequences of her boundless greed completely destroy her artificial life. We proudly stood up from the defense table to gather our authentic documents before walking together through the heavy wooden double doors of the courthouse. We returned to our thriving construction materials company with a profound sense of peace to focus entirely on expanding our commercial operations across the Midwest. Gregory and I eventually opened 3 additional distribution centers to supply major building projects while enjoying the beautiful life we built through pure determination. I spent my weekends relaxing on the porch of our newly purchased home while feeling incredibly grateful for the unshakable partnership I shared with my husband. We permanently erased the toxic presence of my estranged relative from our daily routine to fully embrace a future filled with genuine happiness and unlimited professional success. Before finishing our story today, please do not skip away just yet, because there are some vital perspectives we need to discuss regarding this family conflict. This is not simply about an argument over a commercial construction business, but it is fundamentally about the true definition of loyalty during a crisis. The actual problem is not the stolen corporate funds. Rather, it revolves entirely around the devastating betrayal committed by someone sharing your exact own bloodline. The main lesson to take away from this situation is that extreme greed will eventually destroy the manipulative people attempting to exploit their hardworking relatives. If you currently find yourself struggling in a similar family situation, you must implement these protective strategies immediately. Always secure your personal assets and legal documents before confronting an estranged relative demanding money. Never allow biological connections to force you into accepting manipulative behavior or psychological abuse from toxic siblings. Build a strong support system with honest people who actively stand beside you during your darkest moments. Always remember, true family members will protect your legacy instead of trying to tear it apart for their own personal financial gain. So, if you were in her shoes, what exactly would you do in this specific situation? Would you have handled the forged documents differently when facing the sibling who tried to steal everything you built? Share your thoughts in the comments section below, and please remember to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories.